and welcome to another lawnfawn video. Today we are so excited to be introducing to you our brand new backdrop dies. We have our workshop backdrop portrait and also workshop backdrop landscape. And what's really cool about these is not only do they give you the portrait and the landscape styles, but they also have different size little pockets and they are interchangeable between the two dies, which is so awesome. First up, we're going to take a look at the workshop backdrop portrait. Here you can see that it creates a really cool workshop backdrop with these cute little shelves and a pegboard and some little drawers that you can add or not. Here you can see that the pegboard piece comes out, so you can use it with or without the pegboard, or you can also die cut the pegboard in a contrasting color, which is really awesome. You can also add a contrasting color or a tone-on-tone color behind the pegboard, and it's a really fun way to add lots of color to your cards. Now, these cute little drawers are just adorable, and on each of them there is a little embossed detail that shows you exactly where to put the handle. So you can add some adhesive to the back of the handle and then layer that on each of the pockets. Like I mentioned earlier, these cute little pockets are interchangeable, so there are larger pockets on the landscape style, and these are the smaller pockets, and you can mix and match them between both of the backdrops. At the bottom of both of the backdrop dies, you can see that there's these little holes. You can either layer cardstock behind them, like metallic cardstock, or we've actually sized them to be perfect for these little mini brads. It's such a fun way to add a detail on to these backdrops, and it goes along with it being a workshop. Now, what I like about these is that it could go from being a tool-based workshop, it could be a crafty workshop, and you could use our Just Add Glitter stamp set. It can be a sewing workshop, which we're going to show you a little bit later, an art workshop, which we're also going to show you an idea for. I like that these backdrops can be turned into so many different things. We even have a gardening idea at this end of this video too. Now here you can see the backdrop without the pegboard, and then when you put in the pegboard, and both look so awesome. It just depends on what you're going for on your card. Here is the workshop backdrop in the landscape style. You can see we have the landscape frame and then that little pegboard that comes with it. So you're going to take the piece that the die cuts, the interior of that window, and you're going to line the pegboard up on that piece. We'll hold it in place with some low-tack tape and we'll run it through the die cut machine, and that's going to give us the pegboard. And what I love about the pegboard is that you can add it or not into this workshop backdrop. So here we're going to put some white cardstock behind it, and here you can see the pop of color that comes through that cute little pegboard. And then here are the little pockets or drawers that you can add onto it. And these are a larger size. You can put 3 of these here, which is so super cute. And it's fun to tuck little die cuts or little stamped images inside of them. And then just like the portrait one, you can also add brads to those holes, which is really cute. The other thing I really love about this die is when you use it without the pegboard, it's just a really cool frame. So I've been using that to frame little mini scenes in such a fun way. Now here are the drawers on both of the backdrop dies, and I wanted to show you how you can mix and match them. So you can layer these on this one, and you can even layer 4 of the tiny little drawers onto the landscape one, and then you could put 2 of the larger pockets onto the portrait one. So I really like that it's mix and matchable, and that there's so many different ways to use these dies, and that this landscape one could be a workshop, but it can also just be a cute frame that's a perfect place to frame a scene and have a great sentiment below. Now it's time to start creating some workshops. So we're going to work with the portrait die first, and I'm die cutting this out of some chocolate bar cardstock. And for this one, we're actually not going to use the pegboard. So I'm going to put this aside so I can save it for another card later. Now that bottom area is super cute with those pockets, but it's also the perfect place to put a sentiment. So that's what we're going to do here. We're just putting the backdrop into our Misty tool, and then we're going to mix and match some sentiments from the Mice tool set. So we have Happy Father's Day, and then we also have To a Dad Who Can Fix Anything. And so this has all these mix and matchable sentiments, which are so fun. And you can see that those little rectangles are all sized to be the same size so that they're really easy to line up together to create your own custom sentiments. Then we can pick up the sentiment with the door of our Misty, and we're going to ink it up with some black licorice ink and stamp it on this brown cardstock. And I like the look of the open letters on the brown cardstock. It just looks really cool. Next up, we're going to take some pattern paper from the Really Rainbow collection, and I've trimmed that down to be 5.5 by 4.25, along with a card base of the same size. And all of our backdrops are that standard card size as 5.5 by 4.25, so it's the same as the backdrop. And so we're going to layer this really pretty lined paper that I thought kind of went along with this whole workshop feel. And then we're also going to add some metallic silver cardstock behind those openings on the backdrop to make it look like there's metal in those holes. So earlier we used brass, brads, but you could also use metallic cardstock to get a similar idea. Now to give this a nice pop, we're going to use some of the 3D foam strips all around. You'll see they fit perfectly on the frame and they fit really great on those shelves too. And we can layer it over our pattern paper and we have the perfect little workshop for our mice tools mice. So we've gone ahead and stamped and colored and die cut a bunch of the images from this set and we're going to start layering them into the scene. And we're going to be using lots of foam squares so that they have a nice pop on those popped up shelves. So here we have the cute little mouse who's got his hammer and he's creating something here at the top of the workshop. I love the idea of these tiny little mice like working in this workshop, kind of like Ratatouille, but with tools, right? It's just so cute. And so we're going to layer this little guy who's measuring, I think he's measuring how tall this little baby mouse is. We're going to layer the nails and then these little individual nails there next to the box, which is so sweet. I love this little assembly required box. And I love that this workshop backdrop kind of gives you this cute little frame that you can build adorable scenes in. And so here at the bottom, we're going to add a bunch of our tools and our toolbox as well. The Mice Tool stamp set has all of these cute little mini phrases and they fit perfectly in our all the speech bubbles. So we went ahead and stamped and die cut a speech bubble here and we're going to use the phrase "you really measure up," which goes so well with the guy with the measuring tape, and it's a really cute pun for Father's Day too. So we're going to stamp that in the speech bubble and then just use a light blue marker here to just line the inside of the speech bubble so that it has a little bit of a shadow and a pop when we layer it onto the card. Then we can add some foam squares on the back and layer that right in there. It helps fill in that empty space and the little extra sentiment I just think is adorable on this card. And now this card is all done. It's so super cute. It was so quick and easy to put together and it's just adorable. Now, speaking of quick and easy, clean and simple cards, that's what we're going to create here. So here we have these awesome tools. This is our new Build a Toolbox. And these tools were sized to work with our workshop backdrop, especially in the landscape style. And you're going to see how great they fit in there. So these tools all have the tool and then they have the handles. And we've cut the tools out of metallic cardstock. And then we've used different fun colors of cardstock for all of the handles, which we can layer over top. And there's something about them cut out of the metallic cardstock that makes them feel just so special. Once we have all of the handles layered on, we can go ahead and start adding some details with some markers. So we just picked out markers that were about the same color or maybe slightly darker than the different colors of cardstock. Any marker you have in your stash will do. And we're just going to add little lines on the outside just to give these tools just a little extra shading onto there. So we're kind of going along the little lines that the dies create for us or along the sides of those different handles. Now here is that workshop backdrop in the landscape, and we're going to die cut this out of paper bag cardstock and kraft cardstock. And so for the kraft cardstock one, we're going to be using this pegboard. So you'll see the pegboard is separate, so you can either use this backdrop as a really cute frame for your scene, or you can layer the pegboard in to create this fun workshop feel. So we've die cut that out of the kraft, and then the paper bag is our frame so that we have kind of a tone-on-tone look, but a little bit of a contrast as well. Now, before we start building everything here, we're going to do some stamping just like we did earlier. So we're going to be layering some cute sentiments here at the base. And so here we've got our Happy Father's Day, and then this is the Mice Tools add-on that has even more cute puns. And so it says, "You're totally awesome." So we're going to stamp that underneath. Once we have that in perfect placement, we can pick it up with the door of our Misty, and then we are going to ink this up with some jet black ink onto this backdrop. Next up, to add a little pop of color to the sentiment, we're going to actually fill in these cute outline letters. And the markers work perfect on the different colors of cardstock too, and I think it looks really, really pretty to have that. And so we're going to have a darker blue at the bottom and then the lighter blue at the top to give it that fun kind of gradient look on the letters. Build a Toolbox die set, there's these cute nuts and bolts here, and the cool thing about them is they also fit on the holes in our backdrop dies. So we went ahead and die cut 4 of those out of some silver metallic cardstock, and we also have 4 silver brads. And so we're going to layer one on top, which you could just glue it on top, but adding the brad just makes it even cuter. And then we're going to put the brad through those 2 and then open the prongs in the back to secure it in place. And isn't that such a cute look? Like I said, you could also just glue the little nuts and bolts over top of the openings, and I think it's a really fun way to get more of that workshop feel. And the brads also are just so much fun. I also like using colorful brads in these too to bring pops of color to the bottom area with either cute pockets or a sentiment. Next up here, we've got a standard size card base that's 5.5 by 4.25, and we trimmed down a piece of chocolate bar cardstock to be the same size. And we're going to layer that onto our card base, and then we can start to layer everything from the workshop backdrop. So first we're going to layer in the frame so we know exactly where to put the pegboard, and we can add that over top. And there you can see how it would just be a cute frame for a scene, or you can turn it into your workshop by adding this pegboard. So we're going to add some tape runner to the back of this pegboard here, and we're going to layer that, and that chocolate bar cardstock is going to peek through all of those little openings on our pegboard. Now we're going to bring back those tools from the Build a Toolbox, and you're going to see how cute they look on this pegboard. They really look like little tiny miniature tools. It's just so fun. So we're going to take some foam strips and just layer some foam behind all of these pieces to give them a nice pop. I really like using foam tape on the back of these kinds of images on a clean and simple card because it just gives it that extra detail. And here you can see you can layer them at an angle, you can do horizontally, vertically, etc. The more you kind of change them around, the more it really looks like a real pegboard in someone's garage. Now, the thing that I really love about this is it's perfect for tools, it's perfect for the mice tools, but it's also perfect for a lot of other crafty things like sewing and painting and gardening and crafting, of course. And so next up, Shari is going to turn this into a paint workshop, and then she's going to make a sewing workshop, and it is incredible. So take it away, Shari.
So I love the idea of using these new workshop backdrops as something that's not a typical tool workshop. And today I'm going to be making an art studio. So I have the art supplies dies. I'm going to use a few of the Build a Toolbox dies. But first I need to cut my backdrop. And for the landscape one, the frame is separate from the pegboard. So I am going to cut the frame from a gray textured canvas cardstock, and then I'm going to show you how I did the pegboard. So here's my frame. I also cut a couple of those little drawers. We're going to use those when we build our art studio. But the pegboard is its own die that doesn't even cut around the edges. You can just cut holes if you want. So what I have is a piece of fog cardstock cut to 4.25 by 5.5 that fits right behind my frame. And I'm going to take the pegboard die, I'm going to center it up in the frame. Then I will use some low tack tape to hold it in place. And this will allow me to cut my pegboard into this solid piece that's just going to layer behind the entire frame. So here you can see we have that whole solid piece and just the little holes are cut out. Now I did want to share a trick for easy way I think to get the holes all popped out really easy. If you have one of those little sanding blocks or an emery board, flip it over to the back, run it across, and a lot of those holes will come out. You may have a couple that don't, but they're easy to poke out. This will take care of a lot of them. So this is my background piece, and I'm going to do some stenciling on this before I layer my frame over top. So since this is an art studio, I imagine that there is a rainbow of paint splattered all over this pegboard on the wall. So I'm going to use my grip mat and a rainbow of colors here to add splatters to the pegboard. And I just think it turned out so much fun, and I love all the colors. I'm starting with purple over here on the right. And as you saw, I have all my other ink pads in rainbow order, and I'm just going to kind of work in that order across the card with these paint splatters. So I'm just taking all the lids off so I can easily go from one color to another. And I really like the look of each of these splatters having a blend of two colors, and they all kind of blend together. I am also making sure that I'm not splattering the whole thing all over because I know I'm going to have some other die cut elements on here. So you can see I did like the top right corner. Now I've shifted and moved my stencil around to do the top left corner, and I'm going along with that rainbow still. I have green, I have yellow, my fake tan orange, and then my guava pinky red. And then I'll go back to that grape soda. So we have purple on both sides. So we have the whole gamut of colors. And then I actually did one extra little splatter at the bottom. And I chose to make that one blue because I know all these other colors are really represented in my die cut pieces, but not so much that bright blue. So look how cool that looks just with the frame. I think that's really fun. Now to work on our art elements. So I have the toolbox that I cut from kraft cardstock. I am filling in the holes on the back side with some storm cloud cardstock to fill in those little nail holes. But I'm not done with this guy yet either. So I am pulling out my markers to add some coloring, to add some dimension. I'm just following along those kind of slats that are created by the die to create that toolbox. And then I'm coming in with a slightly lighter brown marker to kind of blend that marker out. I'm also going to add some marker to these little labels for my paint tubes just to give them some shading and shadow. And I will go ahead and assemble my paint tubes here. I cut the base out of some silver metallic cardstock so it looks like it's metal or foil. And then I can add the labels and the little lids. Now I also have this little jar. I cut this out of mist cardstock and I'm going in with some markers that are a little bit darker but that same color family, and I'm just adding some details to give it some shape and make it look more like a rounded jar. So you can see I did those little kind of corners there to make it look rounded like the shine on a glass jar, and then I'm blending with a lighter one to kind of give it that round shape. Now back to my paint box. Of course, if this is in the artist studio, it is also getting splattered with paint, just like the wall. For this, I'm using some Distress Oxide inks because I'm putting this ink onto that craft and I want it to really show up well. And I just picked three different colors and one of the very small splatters on the stencil to stencil some splatters on to my box of art supplies. And I am being sure to pick kind of the smaller splatters in the stencil for stenciling on the box because those giant splatters would just give us too much and get lost and you wouldn't understand kind of what we're looking at here. But look how cute this is with those splatters of paint all over it. Now, more splatters of paint. I wanted some white splatters for texture. So I have all the pieces that I want to splatter white sitting on my desk here, and I'm just going to add some water to my white splatter paint, and we're going to give some splatter texture to the frame, the little drawers, and the toolbox. We know that any studio or any workshop does not have pristine and perfect workbenches, and that's kind of the look I was going for by adding all this fun white splatter. So while that splatter dries, I do have a couple other things to color and assemble. I have this cute little stool. This is from the Canvas and Easel die set, and I thought this would work perfect to make it look like a workbench. I also have the paint brushes, so I need to add the brush part of the paint brushes. I did give them some colorful handles so that we had a lot of color going on. And then I'm adding a silver metallic die cut detail for the metal that holds the brushes to the handle. And then finally, the ruler, it works perfect for an art studio as well as your workshop. And I'm just adding a little bit of shading to it so it has some dimension like everything else. So now we're ready to assemble our art studio. So I'm starting with that piece of fog cardstock that we cut the pegboard into and we stenciled. And this is going to go right onto our card base. So we're going to see that white kind of shine through those little holes. Then I can add my frame, and I'm just using liquid glue to add this. Making sure it's nice and straight with my card. And then I have the little bolts cut there from the Build a Toolbox set, and I'm adding those to the little holes of the frame. And when I do this, I always think of my first architecture job when I did a punch list, and my boss told me that all of the screw heads had to be vertical. And so all of my bolts are nice and straight and all in the same direction. Now I can fill my toolbox or my art box with my art goodies. So I have one of the tubes of paint. I'm going to put the other one in one of the little drawers. Then of course we have our paintbrushes sticking up out of the box, which I think is really fun. And I'm just securing it with a little bit of liquid glue on the handle there. And then this is going to go directly onto the card like it's sitting on the edge of our workbench. So right there where we didn't have any splatters, this is going to fill that void. Then we have our little glass jar, and I'm actually going to use some foam squares on the back of this so it's popped up a little bit and has some dimension off of our box of art supplies. And then we have our drawers, and I pop these up with foam too so that they look like they're partly open. For this one, I'm not adding anything to the drawer, but the other one is going to have that other tube of paint peeking out of it. But I think this gives some really fun dimension, especially since these are drawers that you would normally kind of grab and pull out. So I can tuck this into the drawer there. You noticed I did make sure that I put my foam squares on the left and the right so I could tuck the corner of this right in the center. I'm also adding some foam tape to my stool so it can be popped up as well and make it look like it's more in the foreground. And the little foam strips are perfect for this because they fit perfectly behind the little legs of the stool. And we'll just put this over here to the left beside the two drawers. This is why I only did two drawers instead of all three so that I had space for my little stool. Then we have our ruler. I put foam on that as well. And what I'm actually going to do with this one is make it look like it's hanging on the pegboard. So I'm lining up the hole in the ruler with one of those holes in the pegboard. Now I need a sentiment for this card, and I decided to keep it simple because we have a lot going on. I pulled out Henry's Build a Sentiment Spring, and I am stamping the words "Sending Smiles" on a piece of mermaid cardstock. This could be anything, and the beauty of Henry's Build a Sentiment is you could build any sentiment you needed. You could also put the sentiment on the inside if you wanted something longer. So I just stamped these separate, and then I am trimming them down with my scissors to make some little banners, so some little word fetty pieces, and I will just put those onto the pegboard almost like someone left a note for the artist. They're not even straight, they're just kind of almost like somebody stuck some stickers up here, which I just think is really fun and goes great with the design of this card. And finally, I'm adding my hearts. Now, I know it might sound crazy that I felt like it needed something else, and the hearts were the perfect addition. With so much going on, I hate to say it felt empty, but it did need a little bit of something else. And to me, this kind of feels like someone just stuck heart stickers all over this creative space, and I just think it turned out really fun. It really kind of gave a little more color to those gray areas, and I love the way it turned out. Now, when it came to glitter, of course, we're glittering the hearts, but we're also going to glitter all the things. I put glitter on the paintbrushes, the tubes of paint, I put glitter on the ruler and the stool, and I even put glitter on the drawers. Yes, the glitter is oozing out of the drawers, and I just think that it's a really fun look. There's a lot going on, but this is a beautiful creative space in my opinion. And then here is my finished card. I really love how it turned out. I think it's really fun to take these workshop backdrops and make any workshop. Just think of all the fun things you can create with your dies and your stamps. So for this card, I'm using the new Workshop Backdrop Portrait, which cuts the frame with the cute little shells, and it also cuts out the pegboard that fits behind the frame. And I've cut the pegboard out of mist cardstock and the frame out of narwhal. This is just going to fit right in there. But I'm not making a workshop today, I'm making a sewing shop or a sewing studio, whichever you want to call it. So for my images, I will be using Sew Very Mice and Sewn with Love. You can see I've already colored and cut them out with their coordinating dies. But I want to work on my pegboard, and I'm just going to make sure all these little holes come out. I'm just rubbing the back of it with a sanding block. It makes a lot of those holes come out, and whatever is still stubborn, I can just poke out with my pokey tool. And I thought it would be fun to add some sewing to the pegboard. This is actually an idea that Jess had when we were talking about this idea, and I love how it turned out. So for this, I'm using some pearl cotton thread. So this is not the 6-strand DMC floss, this is 1 strand, but it's a little fatter. And I'm just going to sew into the holes, just some designs. So over here on the side, I'm just doing some half crosses, so some little diagonals. just in those 3 right there, and then what I'm going to do is actually tie my 2 tails together into a knot on the back. So I'm gonna run this underneath those 2 stitches just so that my knot is up here where I started. And I will just tie it in 2 knots and I'll trim off the tails. And that's the way I'm going to secure all the stitches that I'm adding to this. It's going to be glued down, so everything's going to be nice and secure, so those knots really don't matter too much. Now over here on the right top corner, what I did was a bunch of X's, but each X is going to be a different color. So while I still have my pink color on my needle, I'm going to make my first X up here. And then I'm going to do just like I did on that first one and tie the 2 tails together into a knot. And I'm going to do that to all the X's because each one's a different color, so I need to start and stop my thread at each X. And you know me, I like a rainbow of colors, so I am going to be using a rainbow of floss here to do all of my stitches. So here are all the colors I'm going to be using, and I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit to where I have put in most of the colors of the X's here. So you can see I've got an orange one, a yellow one, and then I'm turning the corner here with a green one that I'm going to tie off. Then I will move on to my teal color. And I'm going to do something else with the teal before I take it off the needle, and then I'll come back and add the purple one. But just like the first ones, I'm doing the one direction, then the other, then I'll tie it in a knot and trim off the excess. And while I still have this teal on here, underneath the top shelf up here, I did a little kind of zigzag, but I'm going to do it in 2 different colors. I'm doing the teal first, so I'm skipping each square and doing a diagonal in the same direction. Then I'm going to come back. I about made an X, which is not what I meant to do, that's just habit. Come back in the other direction with a diagonal in the other way and make a cute little zigzag, and then I can just tie this off too. I do come in with a green, I go back in with that little scrap of green I have there, and I do go back in the other direction and crisscross the green with the teal. So I will finish off the X's in the top right corner with purple. And you could add as many fun stitches as you want. I just think this was really fun to add to the pegboard. It gave it some nice texture. It really went with the sewing theme, and so I think it's a great idea. I'm really glad Jess kind of threw that out there, and I was like, yes, let's make it happen. So here I am with the green, going back and doing my diagonal in the other way, and I like the look of this because it overlays the teals, so they're kind of overlapping each other, which I think is fun. But you could get really creative and have all kinds of fun adding color to your pegboard with some floss. So now I want to add this pegboard to my card base, and I am just laying the frame on there first because I know this pegboard drops right inside there. I have not glued that down because I'm going to pop it up with some foam tape. And then I'm just adding liquid glue all over the back of this pegboard piece. I am putting some on top of those stitches just to make sure everything stays glued down. Then I can kind of drop this in between those shelves and that frame, put a little pressure on it. I will peel away the frame carefully, keeping the pegboard in place, and just kind of press around, making sure everything's nice and tucked in. There was a little string tucked out there. I put that back in with my pokey tool, and just making sure everything sets and that glue holds everything in place. Now that my pegboard is glued down, I am going to add foam tape and foam strips all over the back of the frame and the little shelves there, even the little supports under the shelves. And then I can pop this onto my card, and my frame and my shelves are going to be popped up from that pegboard, and it's going to give it some really nice dimension. So I'll just line up the top corner and kind of just drop this into place. And then to cover up those little holes down there, I'm actually going to use the little screw heads, the little Phillips screw heads from the Build a Toolbox die set. And I did something different on this because the foam is behind those holes and I don't want you to see that. So I got really kind of extra here, and I'm actually dropping in the dropout piece, the little X in the middle, in there too, so that these end up being solid. You just see that die cut line where that little X in the screw head is. If I didn't have foam behind that opening, I probably would have just left the screw head without that little insert in the middle, but I don't want you to see the foam. You could also put brads or something fun in these holes as well. So now I'm ready to work on my images, and I wanted to bring the texture that I created with that floss on the pegboard into some of my sewing room images. I'm starting out with this little dress form from So Very Mice, and I'm just taking that, wrapping it around the waist and tying it in a very small little bow. So it's going to look like we have this bow with a ribbon tied around there, and I think it gives it some really fun dimension and texture. So once I get that little bow nice and tight, I'll just trim off all these long tails. And I just think that's a really fun added detail. I'm also going to add some of this twine to this empty spool. I'm going with orange on this one. I'm going to glue it to the back with a little dot of glue. I'll wrap it around the spool a few times till it's nice and full. Then I will secure it on the back with another dot of glue, and I'm going to leave that tail hanging because I'm going to have that kind of hanging off the shelf once I put this on the card. And I'm going to put my tweezers here just to hold that there while that glue dries. Then the third thing I added twine to is this little spool. It's going on top of my sewing machine. So I will go ahead and add that to my sewing machine. You can see this one has twine on the stamped image, so you don't have to do this to make it look full of twine, but I just thought it was a fun way to add some more texture. So I'm going in with green. I'm adding a little dot on the back, and that's where I will secure my twine. I'll wrap it around a few times. I don't have to worry about filling it like the empty spool. Then I'm going to bring it around and secure it on the back of the sewing machine. And I'll pop it through like it's going to the needle. Now there is a long tail on this, but I will trim this off once I get it on the card and get the length that I want. So I've put a foam square on the back of my little dress form. This is going up on the top shelf. I have a little button to decorate with. And then of course I have this little mouse guy. He's going to have his scissors. He's working on this dress up here. I was going to add the scissors to his hands first, but I decided it was better to get him in place first and then add the scissors because these scissors are glued to his hands and then they overlap over onto the dress. Then I can move down to my next shelf. This is where the spool of orange thread comes in. I'll add a foam square there so it can be popped up just like the shelf. Remember, the shelves are popped up, so everything we put on those shelves also need a foam square. So I'm adding this to the corner, and then I put a little bit of liquid glue on the frame. That's where I'm going to wrap around that little tail of twine, and it will hold it in place once it's dry. Then we have this little guy, which he is my favorite, the one with the thimble on his head. He just makes me laugh. And then there is also this tiny little pin, the single pin from Sewn with Love, and I thought it would look cute to look like it's sticking out of the top of that spool. Now we have our sewing machine, which is the main piece down here on the bottom on the desktop. I've added some foam squares through the center because the spool and the bottom are going to touch the shelf and the desktop there, so I only need to support it through the center. And then I can just pop this into place. I also have my little tomato with my pins in it, and I'm also going to add a little thimble down here. This is a very full sewing station. And then we have our final little mouse. Now he needs his needle with thread, so I just need to add a little bit of glue to his hand and add that needle. Then I will put some foam on the back of him so he can stand over here to the left of the sewing machine. And this is where that twine is going to come off the sewing machine, kind of loop around into his hand with a little dot of glue, and then I will secure it over here on the edge with some more glue and trim off the excess right at the frame. And how cute is this? Oh, we're not done yet. I still have 2 little buttons. These little buttons are so cute, but I thought they would be fun just to add to the background as more color and more decoration. So now I'm ready for my sentiment, and my sentiment is actually a combination of both stamp sets. So we have the word "so," which is nice, big, and scripty and has a coordinating die. And then we have "You Are So Amazing" from the So Very Mice stamp set. So I stamped the word "so" on a piece of mist cardstock with some black pigment ink and clear embossing powder to make it a black embossed sentiment. And since this has a coordinating die, I will cut it out. You can see I've already done that once on this sheet of cardstock. So let me set that aside and then I'll work on the rest of my sentiment. So this is a sentiment banner and I'm going to line up the "You Are So Amazing." We're lining it up to the left. Sorry about my head, I'm just making sure it's straight. We're gonna stamp this sentiment twice and emboss it. So first we're gonna stamp "You Are." So I'm going to cover up the rest of the stamp with a Post-it, ink it up with some black ink, remove that Post-it and stamp the "You Are." And we will go ahead and add our clear embossing powder and heat this up and emboss it because I don't want to accidentally knock off the embossing powder while I do the second part of the sentiment. So now all I have to do is put that banner back into my MISTI. I will make sure that the "You Are" is nice and cleaned off, nice and dry. We're going to bring our Post-it note back in, mask off the first part of the sentiment, and just ink up the word "amazing." And this is going to leave us a gap where the word "so" is, and that gap happens to be the perfect size to fit the S from our little scripty "so." So I'm adding my clear embossing powder, I'm heating that up with my heat tool, and now we have the "You Are Amazing." And we need to trim off the banner on the right side of the word "amazing." It's a little longer than I want it to be. So I will just take the same die I used to cut the banner. I'm going to line it back up by kind of snapping it to the top and bottom, and we'll cut off that extra tail on the right. And then back to our scripty word "so." I'll get out the coordinating die for this word. I love that there is a die for the word "so" and the word "cute." I just think that's so much fun. And we'll line this up, hold it in place with a little bit of low-tack tape, and run that through the die cut machine. And I will pop this out of the die, and you're going to see just how perfectly this fits in that little void in our sentiment. Just like that. I think that's just so perfect. So let's add this to our card. So I'm adding the whole banner first, making sure it's nice and centered. I think that looks really great, especially between those little screw heads we have on there. And then we have our word "so." You are so amazing. And now we need our glitter. So I'm adding glitter to all the things that are metal, the thimbles and the scissors, a little bit to the tips of the pins, the little ball on the ends of the pins. And then I also added some glitter to that decorative line on the sewing machine. And then here is my finished sewing studio with those cute little mice. I think it turned out so cute. I love all the little sewing details and the embroidery in the background.
Shari, you are so amazing. I am officially obsessed with this card. The little stitching details and the twine everywhere is just so cute. And then this art studio, oh my gosh, how adorable is that with everything tucked into the little pockets too. Oh, I just love it. And speaking of tucking things into pockets, this card by Tammy just blew me away. All the little nuts and bolts and the wrench in the pocket and then the mouse with his little feet sticking up. Isn't that so cute? I want to make a card just like this one. And then here, oh my goodness, Audrey is going to blow you away because she made a whole gardening workshop, or it could be like a greenhouse. Isn't that so sweet? This card by Megan is just adorable. I love her blue and yellow and kraft. It's such a cool color combo, and the card is just so sweet. And then this one here by Elise is just adorable, and I love her bold dad die cut letters. It's so perfect on this card. I love this little workshop by Lynette. She added the mice tools on there, and it's just so sweet and cute. And then this card here by Megan is just adorable. I love all of these tools layered on just everywhere. It's just so sweet. And then here, Grace turned it into a closet. You guys, I can't. It's all of the bunny's clothes on little hangers. You won't believe what the hangers are. The hangers are the bow from our Valentine accessories for the Build-A-Bunny, and the little hook is the pirate hook. And that is how she created the cutest and most adorable little closet. I also want to make a card just like this one. In this card here, you can see how I use the workshop backdrop as a frame to help set my scene instead of as a pegboard, and I think it's such a cool way to use that die. And then this card here by Letitia is so fun. I love her red and yellow and craft. It's a great look. And then this card here by Audrey is so creative because she just used the pegboard without the backdrop, and I think that's amazing. So we cannot wait to see all of your workshops and how creative you guys get with these dies, so make sure to share it with us. Thank you so much for watching today, and I hope you have an absolutely amazing day. Bye!